This video covers lesson 4.3b, solving equations with fractions. So we're still solving equations in a similar fashion that we did in the previous lessons. The main difference is that now we're going to have more fractions involved. So you can see that the steps are very similar. You collect the variables to one side, and then you collect the constants to the other side. You isolate the variable itself, and then you solve for what the variable actually is. We use our inverse operations as we did previously. The main difference is that we now have to eliminate the denominator. So fractions have a denominator. We have to eliminate that to make it a little bit easier in order to actually solve the equation. So just a little reminder, for example, if we had, let's say, 2 over 3 plus 1 over 4, to actually add these fractions together, you would need to find the LCD, the lowest common denominator. So between 3 and 4. So one easy way to do that is to just multiply your denominators. So if we got 3 times 4, we would get 12. The only thing with that is it doesn't always ensure that it's your lowest common denominator. Another way to do it is to do multiples. For example, I can start with multiples of 3. So 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, so on and so forth. I can do multiples of 4 because my other fractions of 4 are there. So 4, 8, 12, and then find that lowest number that they share in common here, and that would happen to be 12. So in that case, it worked out. That's my lowest common denominator. And so to solve this, I would have to, or to find the answer to this, I would have to put both these fractions on the lowest common denominator by multiplying by the correct number. So to make your 3 a 12, you'd have to multiply this fraction by 4. So we would get 4 times 2/3. 4 over 4 times 2/3, I should say. You're multiplying both top and bottom by 4. So you'd get 8 over 12. And then you would do the same thing with the 1 over 4. You would have 1 over 4. But to get 4 to become 12, you wouldn't multiply it by 4. You'd multiply it by 3. So we're doing top and bottom, multiply them by 3. And we get 3 over 12. And now that both those numbers are on the same common denominator, you can proceed to find the answer by adding these two numbers up. So we had 8 over 12 plus 3 over 12, and that would give us 8 plus 3, 11 over 12. So we spent a big chunk of the first part of the course going over how to add, subtract, multiply, divide fractions. Please make sure you review that because this will come into play in this lesson. So again, go back to review lowest common denominators and how to add and subtract and multiply and divide fractions, as it will be very helpful for this part of the unit. So now we're going to go and take a look at some simple examples of solving where we have some fractions involved. We'll do one that we've kind of seen already. We have the x over 4 is equal to 2, and you want to solve the equation. So we want to find what x is equal to. So what we need to do when we have fractions is get rid of that denominator by multiplying by a common denominator. And a good idea is to use usually the lowest common denominator. So we have x over 4 is equal to 2. Now, in this case here, the lowest common denominator, the LCD, is going to be 4. Now, remember, we have x over 4. The denominator of 2 is really 1. We just don't write it down. It's 2 over 1. So 4 is our lowest common denominator. 4 times 1 is 4. I can get both of these to be on the lowest common denominator. X over 4 is already there, so that's fine. So we'll have x over 4 is equal to 2 over 1. And my goal is to get rid of the denominator. So to get rid of the denominator, what I do is I multiply everything by the lowest common denominator. So I do 4 times x over 4 is equal to 4 times 2, and then that would be 4 over 4 cancels out, so x is equal to 8. So what we did is we found the lowest common denominator, multiplied everything by the lowest common denominator, and then that gave us our variable. In this case, that's the only step we really had to do because our variable was already isolated. It was already by itself, and the constant was already on the other side. In a situation like this, you could have just done the inverse operation method, which is what we were doing earlier. It's the same thing, really. We have x over 4, and you know that x is being divided by 4. So the opposite of dividing is multiplying. So what that means is you're going to do 4 times x over 4. Since you multiplied the left side by 4, you're going to multiply the right side by 4 as well. This cancels out, and we get x is equal to 8. Now we're going to try example 2. Solve the equation. Here it's a bit different because we have more fractions this time, and also our variable is not isolated. As you can see, we have a variable with a constant on the left side and a constant on the right side as well. So we're going to have to do a few more steps here. But before we begin, let's answer a few questions. So first of all, what's the coefficient in front of the x? So here we have minus x over 3. Remember, the coefficient is the number that is in front of your x. So for example, if I had 2x, that would be a coefficient of 2. Now here I have minus x over 3. Another way to write this is minus 1 over 3 x. It's the same thing as minus x over 3. So our coefficient is really minus 1/3. That's the coefficient that's in front of the x. Now our first step is going to be to get rid of these denominators, just to make solving a little bit easier. And to do that, we need to find a common denominator to multiply everything by. And remember, we want to use the lowest common denominator. That's our goal here. So our lowest common denominator between all these numbers here looks like it's going to be 6. So what we can do is we can eliminate those denominators by multiplying everything in the equation by 6. So I'm going to do 6 times half minus 6 times x over 3, which is going to be equal to 6 times 1/3. And then I'm going to go and clean this up here. So we have 6 times 1 is 6 over 2 minus 6x over 3, which is equal to 6 times 1 up here, 6 over 3. And then I'm going to simplify this. So 6 over 2 is 3 minus 6 over 3, so that's 2x, and then is equal to 6 over 3, 2. So in reality what happened is the 6 over 2, the 2 cancels out, and this becomes a 3, because it's just 6 divided by 2. Over here the 3 cancels out, and the 6 becomes a 2, because it's just 6 divided by 3. And same idea here, the 3 cancels out, and the 6 becomes a 2, because it's just 6 divided by 3. So now we have a nice simple equation that we can go solve using our inverse operations that we learned from the previous lessons. So I can do 3 minus 3 minus 2x is equal to 2 minus 3. Whatever you do to the left side, you need to do to the right side. I'm just going to continue the work up here. That's going to be negative 2x is equal to 2 minus 3, which is negative 1. And then I'm going to unmultiply. I'm going to do the inverse operation of a multiplication, which is a division. So divided by negative 2 here, divided by negative 2 here as well. The negative 2's cancel out. So I get x is equal to negative 1 over negative 2, which is just 1 over 2. Because when you divide a negative number by another negative number, that becomes a positive number. And so there we've solved for x by getting rid of the denominator in the fractions. We'll try another example together. What I recommend is you pause the video, try it yourself first, and then check to see if you're on the right path. So example 3a, x over 3 minus x over 4. Remember that we want to multiply each term by the lowest common denominator. So in this case here, our lowest common denominator is going to be 12. So I'm going to multiply everything by 12 just to get rid of the denominator. So I'll do 12 times x over 3 minus 12 times x over 4. Don't lose that minus sign there. Which is going to be equal to 12 times 3. And then we'll simplify this a little bit. So this 3 gets canceled out, and 12 divided by 3 is 4, so that's going to be 4x. Minus this 4 gets canceled out. 12 divided by 4 is 3, so that's minus 3x. Is going to be equal to 12 times 3 is 36. Now we can simplify and solve. So 4x minus 3x is x. It's nice and easy there. Is equal to 36. And then of course you can go in and verify your work afterwards. A little word of caution, if you're having trouble finding the LCD, you're just stuck on it for some reason, even if you don't have the lowest common denominator and you multiply by a common denominator, it will still provide you with the same answer in the end, since you're going to be dividing and the ratio will be the same. But the safest practice is to find that lowest common denominator, just a little bit easier to deal with. So you should try examples B, C, and D, and then E as well, and we'll take that up in the next video along with example 4.